At 16, the very first medical intervention I ever had was a double mastectomy in the name of gender-affirming care. I only had one consultation with the surgeon and one with the gender clinic before I was allowed to do this. I was not able to fully give consent at the time due to both my age and my mental health issues. A few months later, I was then put on cross-sex hormones and started taking testosterone. There was nothing wrong with my body. I was just a teenager that was uncomfortable. At 16, I did not understand what the long-term impacts of this care would be, if you could call it care.
That's testimony before the Nebraska State Legislature warning about the potential consequences and irreversible decisions that come with undergoing gender transition at a young age. Nebraska lawmakers have now proposed a ban on child sex changes through Chloe's Law. It would prohibit medically transitioning children to the opposite sex. It makes the procedures grounds for suspending or revoking doctors' medical license and bans insurance coverage for children's sex change procedures. Again, if this were to go through. Luka Hein is the person who you heard from in that video right there. Luka, thanks so much for coming on. If you could explain to our viewers really why you were called to testify.
I was called to testify because as someone who has been through this system and then came out the other side of it harmed by it, it is very important to let that aspect of it be known. Especially considering I was only 16 when all this happened. So,
Right.
That's the age that a lot of this is happening to kids now.
Undergoing a serious surgery, you take a healthy young woman and go through a surgery that is now irreversible, quite frankly. You mentioned the age, and I think that that's really the focus of lawmakers right now, affecting minors. Could you speak to that? How often have you heard of that happening? How easy was it for you to undergo this process?
It is affecting a lot more young people than I think people realize. And as far as how easy it was, as soon as I mentioned anything dealing with gender when it came to mental health things, all of the other issues I was dealing with seemed to be pushed aside, and that was all that was focused on, to the point of certain trauma and things I went through never being dealt with by these professionals. And instead, I was pushed straight really down the path of affirmation and then medicalization.
What about family? Sometimes you wonder, are there family on board who might say, let's pause, let's wait a second, let's at least wait until, this child becomes an adult at age 18 before you make a lifetime decision. Was there anyone who was maybe advocating for you from a personal level or even from a medical level as well? Were the doctors taking pause?
As far as the doctors, not so much. Any concerns my parents really had were kind of squashed with this narrative of, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? And using suicide almost as emotional blackmail, that if you do not affirm this, you do not go through with this, your kid is going to kill themselves, despite the fact that I was never suicidal. My parents were still kind of emotionally manipulated with that talking point. And any concerns they have, like I said, they were squashed by that, using that narrative.
Could you speak to that? Because I've heard of that phrase before. Is that really the solution? Or do children who undergo gender transition surgery still deal with serious mental health challenges?
Well, oftentimes there are oftentimes a lot of comorbidities, and those are not getting dealt with because they focus so much on the gender affirming care aspect of things. That phrase in itself, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son? That is not the words of a medical professional. That is the words of an activist. And as far as after they've transitioned, one of the long-term studies we shows that the rates of being suicidal in people who have transitioned is actually higher years after they have completed all the procedures.
Luka, if you could go back in time to when you were 16, what do you wish would have happened differently?
I wish I would have just been given an opportunity to learn what it's like to even be an adult before any of this happened. And also, I wish that there had been more focused on just someone telling me, yes, it is normal to feel uncomfortable in your body, and we're going to get you the help you actually needed. And we're going to, maybe embrace the fact that you want to be more of a tomboy, or you don't have to just be one way to be a woman, and that being uncomfortable doesn't make you a boy.
Yeah. And just final question for you on this. Are there any sort of negative outcomes from undergoing the surgery at such a young age that you are dealing with today?
As far as the surgery, I have essentially no feeling in my chest, aside from occasionally getting like little muscle spasms. And from cross-sex hormones, it has damaged my body to the point where my joints hurt almost constantly. My vocal cords hurt if I talk too long, and then there's like the irreversible changes that taking testosterone at such a young age for such a long time can cause that I will just have to live with for the rest of my life.
Well, you're using your voice to speak out. Again, this law would essentially prohibit medical professionals from performing these surgeries, including prescribing those hormones and drugs for anyone under age 19. Luka Hein, thanks so much for coming on today. We appreciate it. Thank you.